Good morning, everyone. I am teacher Jarrett, and today we are going to be reading a story together. The story we are going to be reading today is called Spark's Toys. Spark's Toys by Nora Carson, illustrated by Kristen Varner. And later we are going to have a paired read called Sorting Fruit. So let's go to the next page and see what this story is about. So the genre of this story is fantasy. And the essential question is, how can we classify and categorize things? Spark's Toys by Nora Carson, illustrated by Kristen Varner. Chapter 1, Spark's Toys, page 2. Chapter 2, Spark's Favorite Toy, page 6. Chapter 3, Spark's Big Surprise, page 8. Respond to reading, page 12. Paired read, Sorting Fruit, page 13. Focus on genre, page 16. Okay, page 1. Oh, page 2. Chapter 1, Spark's Toys. Meet Spark the cat. Spark really loved to play with his toys. He played with his toys all day long. He played with his toys all night long, too. So we can see here is Spark the cat, and he's playing with all of his toys. Here's a little mouse toy. Here's a ball of yarn toy. Here's some string on a pole with a little fuzzy thing on the end. So many toys, right? But Spark had too many toys, and he left them all over the house. This got him into a whole lot of trouble with Mrs. King. "Spark," said Mrs. King one day, "you need to clean up this mess." But Spark did not clean up. He was too busy playing. So we can see here are all of the toys all over the house. And it's so messy. But Spark won't clean up because he's too busy playing. Spark especially liked to play with 4 small balls. He would move them around with his paws. Then he chased them as they rolled away. Spark liked his bright yellow round ball of yarn too, but sometimes he got tangled up in it. So we can see here's 1, 2, 3, 4 balls. And here's the ball of yarn. Yarn is another word for string. And so the string would sometimes get wrapped all around Spark and he would get stuck. But it looks like a fun toy. Spark also had toys that squeaked. Sometimes Mrs. King stepped on them. "Spark," she said, "would you please put away your toys?" But Spark put none of his toys away. He was too busy playing. Oh, we can see here's Mrs. King stepping on a duck, and it goes squeak. Chapter 2, Spark's Favorite Toy. Spark had toys of all shapes and sizes. He had large and small furry toys. He had long poles with strings attached. But do you know what he liked best? Spark liked to play with boxes. He had plenty of them around the house. If Mrs. King couldn't find Spark, all she had to do was open a box and Spark would be there. "Ah, this is the life," thought Spark. "I can play all day long I can play all day and all night long. Spark didn't know it, but things were about to change. Chapter 3, Spark's Big Surprise. One day, Mrs. King came home early from work. She was holding something small and furry. Spark, she said, I have a little surprise for you. This is Rose. She put Rose down on the floor right next to Spark. Rose is your new friend. Please help me take care of her, said Mrs. King. We have to make room for Rose's bed and bowls. You need to put your toys away. Spark knew that Mrs. King was right, but where could he put all his toys? Oh, look, here's Spark, and here's Rose. They look like they're going to be good friends. Spark looked around and saw the boxes. Suddenly, he had an idea. He sorted his toys. He put the small toys in one box. He put bigger toys in a bigger box. Then he put the biggest toys in the biggest box. He left only one ball on the floor. He knew Rose would like it. So we can see here's the box of small toys, and medium-sized toys, and big toys. So 3 boxes for 3 different types of sizes, right? Yeah. And here's a ball that he left on the floor for Rose to play with. Okay. Spark liked to play with Rose. They played together all day long. And when Rose was sleeping, Spark jumped into his box and played with his toys. So you can see here's Rose. Rose is sleeping. And here is Spark in his box playing with his toys, right? Okay. Okay, so that is the end of our story, and now it is time to respond to reading. Yay! Okay. So we are going to retell the story, and we are going to use the chart to help you retell Spark's toys. And today we are going to do a character clue point of view chart. So let's make our chart together. So here is the character box. Here is the clue box. And here is the point of view box. Okay. So we are going to tell the story using characters' feelings, and we're going to put a clue that helps us know what they are feeling. Okay? So first, we will put character here. And then we will put clue here. And then we will put point of view here. Okay, so let me fix this. Okay. So at the very beginning of the story, what do we see? At the very beginning, we saw that Spark liked playing with his toys, but that Mrs. King was angry because he had too many toys, right? So our first character we will write is Mrs. King. And the point of view is that she is angry, right? And so now let's look for a clue to find out why she is angry. So we can see that Mrs. King, let me zoom in here. No, zoom out a little bit. Nope, that won't work. Let me put this, move this here. So he can say, we see where this got him into a whole lot of trouble with Mrs. King, right? She said, Spark, you need to clean up this mess. Okay, so now we are going to respond to reading. We are going to retell the story, and we will use the chart to help you retell Spark's toys. So today we are doing a character, clue, and point of view chart. So let's make our character box, and then our clue box, and then our point of view box will be on this side. I'm going to make myself a little smaller here so that we can see the point of view box. Okay. Okay. So let's put the titles of the boxes here. Okay, so here we have character, and here we have clue, and here we have point of view. Okay, so let's go back to the very top page. At the beginning, we can see that Spark had a lot of toys, and we can see that Mrs. King thought that he had too many toys and that he didn't clean up, right? Yeah. So for our first character, we will talk about Mrs. King. And we will give the point of view that she was angry, right? And what's our clue that she was angry? She said, Spark. We can say she said, you need to clean up this mess. Right? So we know that she thought he was too messy. So that means she was angry with him, right? If she was happy with him, she wouldn't ask him to clean up his mess. So now let's go to the next page. So we can see here that Spark was happy, right? Spark was happy because he had so many toys. So let's put our next character is Spark. And Spark was happy, right? And why was he happy? We can see Spark was happy because he had so many toys, right? Okay. So now let's go to the next page. If we go on down to the next page, we can see that Mrs. King was angry again, right? Because she was stepping on his toys. And Spark was happy because he was playing with his toys. This is another important part. So let's write about Spark again. And we can say that Spark was happy, right? And Spark was happy because he had so many boxes, right? So here we can see Spark was happy because he had so many boxes to play in. Now, the next page talks about Rose, right? So Mrs. King brought Rose back to talk to Spark. She put Rose on the floor, and Rose and Spark were good friends, right? So let's put the next character as Rose and Spark. So we can say that the clue, the point of view is that they were happy. And we know they were happy because Rose and Spark were friends, right? So we know that. Now let's go to our last page. This page is about Spark putting away all of his toys and about Rose sleeping and Spark playing in his box when Rose was asleep, right? So for our last character, we can say Mrs. King, Rose, and Spark, right? So we can make a guess how they felt. Let me move this up. So even though it doesn't talk about Mrs. King on the last page, we can make an inference that we know how Mrs. King felt. So at the end, we'll say that they were all happy because Spark cleaned his toys and still had time to play, right? So the last part of the story is that Mrs. King, Rose, and Spark were all happy because Spark cleaned his toys and still had time to play, right? So let's go through this one more time. At the beginning, Mrs. King was angry because she said you need to clean up this mess. So she didn't like Spark with his toys all over the floor. But Spark was so happy. He was happy because he had so many toys, right? So later on in the story, Spark was still happy because he had so many boxes. Then Rose came, and Rose and Spark were happy because Rose and Spark were friends. And finally, Mrs. King, Rose, and Spark were all happy because Spark sorted his toys and cleaned his toys, but Spark still was able to play with his toys when Rose was sleeping. Okay, so that's how we can retell the story using characters, clues, and points of view. So I'm going to erase this, and we can go on and answer our questions together. Okay, so now I'll make our question answer box right here. And let's type the first question. Okay, look at page 3. Who is speaking? How does Mrs. King feel about Spark's toys being all over the house? How does Spark feel? Okay, so let's go up to page 3. So on page 3, Mrs. King is speaking, right? And how does she feel about Spark's toys being all over the house? Well, we said before that we think she's angry, right? And how does Spark feel? Spark did not clean up. He was too busy playing. So Spark was happy because he had all of his toys all over the house, right? Okay, so let's answer this question. Mrs. King was speaking. Mrs. King was angry that Spark's toys were all over the house, but Spark was happy, right? Okay. So now let's go to our next question. Our next question is, look at page 11. How does Spark feel about Rose? Okay, so question 2. Look at page 11. How does Spark feel about Rose? So page 11 is right here. So we can see that Rose is sleeping and Spark is playing. And we can see here, if we read the story, it says, Spark liked to play with Rose. They played together all day long. So we can answer the question and say, Spark liked Rose. He liked playing with Rose, right? Yeah, good. Now let's go to our last question. Okay. I'll make myself bigger again. Okay. So the question is, what kind of, what kind of story is this? How do you know? Okay. So we know that this is a fantasy story, right? So we know this is a fantasy story. We know it is a fantasy because cats cannot sort their own toys or talk to or understand humans right? So we know the story is a fantasy story, and we know it is a fantasy story because cats cannot sort their own toys by size or understand humans, right? Mrs. King said, go clean up your toys. And Spark went and cleaned up. But in real life, if a human told a cat to go clean their toys, most cats would not listen and they would not understand, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's go to our next page. Genre, this is our next story. Genre, nonfiction. Compare texts. How can we sort things? Sorting fruit. Look at the different kinds of fruit. How can you sort them? You can sort by color. Which fruit is yellow? Which fruits are green? Which fruit is brown and green? So the pineapple is brown and green, and a banana is yellow. You can sort by shape. Which fruits are round? So grapes are round and apples are round. You can sort by how a fruit feels. Which fruits feel smooth? Which fruits feel sharp? So a pineapple feels sharp, but a banana and an apple and a grape all feel smooth, right? Great. So now make connections. Look at both selections. What did you learn about sorting? So we learned in Spark's story that you can sort by size, right? Small, medium, large. And we learned in the fruit story that you can also sort by many other things, by color, by touch, by size, and by shape, right? So there are many ways you can sort things. Okay, now focus on genre. Fantasy. A fantasy is a story that may have made up characters, settings, and actions. A fantasy could not happen in real life. What to look for? In Spark's toys, Spark sorts his toys by size. Real animals don't think about doing things like that. Your turn. Write your own idea for a fantasy about an animal. Name the animal and write what it does. Share your ideas with a classmate, or you can share with your mother and father too. So you can do this on your own. This is your homework, okay? Now we're going to go to the last page of our lesson and answer some more questions, okay? Okay. So I will make our answer box, and then we can write the questions and answer them together. Okay. So our first question is about setting. Where did this story take place? Why is the setting important? So we know, or you can just say, this story took place at Mrs. King's house. The setting is important because the house belonged to Mrs. King. So Spark should listen to her when she tells him to clean, right? So if the story was at Spark's house, then it wouldn't matter, right? Because Spark can do whatever he wants in his own house. But the story was at Mrs. King's house. So Spark should listen to Mrs. King when she tells him to clean up, right? Okay. So now let's go to our next question. Who is the main character? How would you describe the characters in the story? And let's put our other question box here so we can make our question box on the left bigger. Okay. So we'll make our box here and put the question in it. And then we can make our other box bigger. So what conclusion can you draw about sorting? How did sorting help Spark? Okay, so now before we answer that question, let's make this bigger. So we know that the main character in this story is Spark, right? And we can describe the characters. We can say all of the characters in the story are nice, right? Because Spark is nice, and Mrs. King is nice, and Rose is nice. And they like being friends with each other, right? So even though Mrs. King gets a little angry she still is nice to Spark, and they're all friends, right? Yeah, good. Okay, now let's answer our last question of the day. Okay. So, what conclusion can you draw about sorting? Well, we can say that sorting helps us clean and organize our space, right? We can also say that sorting makes it easier to find things when we want them, right? Because if you want to play with a big toy and you sort your toys into a small box, medium box, and big box, then you just go to the big box and pull out a big toy. You don't have to look all around to try to find your box or try to find a big toy, right? And like we saw with Spark, it helped him clean up his house too. Okay, that's our next question. How did sorting help Spark? Sorting helped Spark clean up his toys and make it easy to play with them. Just make it easy to play, right? So we know that sorting helped Spark clean up his toys because he put all of the toys all over the house into just 3 boxes, right? And it also made it easy to play with his toys because when he wanted to find a little ball, he just went to the box with small toys and pulled a little ball out, right? So that is all of our lesson for today. So now it is time for me to say bye-bye. And I will see you next time, okay? Next time we'll keep reading and learning together. Okay, bye-bye.